Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's March 3rd, 2018, and today's topic is another solar panel topic. And in January of this year, the Trump administration announced a 30% tariff on the for imported solar panels coming from outside of the United States. So, the question is, how is that going to impact you if you've been thinking about having solar panels installed on your roof? We've had our solar panels installed on a rack array out back in 2012, and then we had it expanded just about 2 years ago as well. So, and I'm delighted with what we've been able to produce and how we're using it on our property, and it's been fantastic. And so some of you may be thinking, geez, man, I waited too long, now there's a 30% increase. Other people will be saying, well, I know that prices are coming down, that'll get offset in how many years or whatever. You may be having trouble trying to figure out how to work your way around it. So the first thing is, I want to start off with who's actually making these solar panels. So they're made, we think of Eastern Asia. We think of China as being the one who were the dominant force, and they had a lot of government support that really backed them. A lot of people said that China was, cutting their margins to try and capture the American market. And I think that it basically was just simply that their government really saw the need for investing in renewable energy resources, along with other countries where the United States really, the large corporations really influenced our government to not support to increase the incentives for the manufacturing of solar panels as much as other countries were doing. So nowadays, Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Canada Solar, and Germany's really had some really interesting innovations and increased the efficiency at a higher cost as well. So there are other companies all over the world that are making these solar panels, and that's something to be aware of. And we're making them in the United States now. People are familiar with the name Solar City. There was a lot of bashing that went on a few years ago. A lot of politically driven bashing, unfortunately. I'm a big supporter of Elon Musk and Tesla, which is Solar City, and I like them so much. One of the reasons is because of their open source and many of their innovations, and certainly taking the bull by the horn and showing industries that it is possible to do some of these things that the corporations fed the media, that it's cost prohibitive, and natural gas and oil, fossil fuels were a better way to go. Unfortunately, fortunately now I think the tide is changing, and people are realizing how important these renewable sources of energy are. So back to and I'll have topics in the future potentially about Tesla and some of their innovations, and why I think their corporation is so important to at least be following, because they are trend centers. I live in New York State, so in Buffalo, New York, there's the second gigafactory going up now, producing the power walls as well, and that's another topic I'll be spending time on in the future. However, how is this 30% tariff going to impact you if you're thinking about having solar panels installed? So the first thing to realize is that the tariff really doesn't get imposed until after 2.5 gigawatts of solar panels come into the United States. So that means about 60% of the purchasers are going to be affected. The first, 40% aren't going to be affected, because that's the first 2.5 gigawatts. excuse me, so that takes, if we take, divide 60% into that 30%, that brings us down to about 18% increased costs of those people putting in the solar panels and having those installed. So that's about an 18% increase in costs. However, when we think about when I had Bill Edwards from Skyline Solar come and install our solar panels, well, the solar panels themselves only made up, I don't know, 30 to 35%. I don't know exactly how much, but it's somewhere around 1/3 of the total cost, because you have your inverters, whether you're using a microinverter or a string inverter or any of the new systems that are there. There's a whole infrastructure, the rack mounting system or the roof mounting structures, components, the labor that's involved. You certainly have the cost of permits and licenses. You have the cost of advertising, marketing, trying to get customers as well. So there's all these costs involved that you're paying when you're having someone install your system. And let's say it's 1/3 of the cost. The solar panels only make up 1/3. So we take that 18% and take 1/3 of that, and we're down to about 6%. So if you're planning on having the solar panels installed in the near future, well, then maybe it's 5 or 6 or maybe 7% increase in costs. However, it's important to think about how does that time-wise figure everything. So, as I mentioned, when we installed our solar panels back in 2012, I had been investigating for almost 30 years the possibility of having solar panels installed. And they were so inefficient, so expensive at that time. And since the time that we had our solar panels installed, the costs have steadily come down each year, and the efficiency of solar panels had continued to increase. Now, of course, there's that sweet spot, that intersection of those two things, and if you've got a large enough roof space or rack space, then you can afford to have less efficient ones that are to meet your needs, and therefore pay less as a result. But there's more inverters, potentially more labor, and so on. So I don't know that it's a big cost savings that way. So how much does it set us back? There's a nice graph that I found online that shows that about every 6 months or twice a year, that 5% or 6% reduction in the cost. So the way that I look at it is that in January, when this announcement came out, or whenever it goes into effect, and maybe it's already into effect, we're just back 6 months as far as the price, because we're about 5 or 6% more that we're paying for the total cost. And so you may say, well, let's just wait 6 months and see, and then we'll be at the same point, and it'll be much more economical. And that may be the case, but another topic that I'll be talking about in the future will be about how are utilities dealing with all of these producers, these homeowners that are producing so much electricity during the daylight hours, sending it back to the grid. And let's say, for ease of numbers, let's say I would be charged 10 cents per unit of electricity, and I sell it to National Grid for 10 cents per unit. Well, they're handling it both ways, and they have the infrastructure, they have all of the other systems. They've got to pay for gas fired plants to fire up when there's a big demand for power. They have to do all of these things when typically the grid, the utility may be paying just 2.5 cents or 4%, or I'm sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cents per unit of electricity. So that's just something to think about, because I think that the utilities now are starting to realize that this is growing, and somehow we have to be fair to to that company for dealing with all this power that all of us are asking them to deal with, as we produce so much during the daytime hours and then we want it back during the evening hours, or in our part of the country during the winter time when we're all overcast, or snow on our panels as well. So I think that some of these utilities, if you're buying into the system early on, you may get grandfathered in, and that'll be a topic that I've got to do a lot more research on in the future to find out how that actually works out and all. So if there's interest in this, I'll pursue that topic as well. So why is it that the costs of creating these panels is coming down and the efficiency is going up? Well, some of it has to do with Moore's law, which really talks about the increased efficiency of these integrated chips, where basically the capacity doubles every couple of years. And so there's that component. Then there's the economy of scale, as there are fixed costs to manufacturing, and certainly by the time you double it, you may be saving 10-15% every time you double the number of solar panels that you produce. So as the production volume goes up, the relative cost doesn't necessarily double every time you double the amount of production that you're creating, because of fixed costs. Maybe, the building that you're in, you have more space to go in, and a whole variety of issues like that. Then we have all these technology innovations, and that's one of the reasons why I love another topic is going to the Genius Olympiad every year, because I see all these young folks, high school age students, who are maybe getting mentored by their various mentors in school or in college, or their parents, and really being innovative in some of the ways that they're approaching some of the common problems. And so there's these creative, innovative technology groups that are picking up these young minds, going into these different labs all over the world, and that's where we need to foster more of this in the United States, because there's so much creativity in these kids, and it may have to do with the physics or the chemistry, and thinking outside of the box. Like, there's so many different ways how that, not just solar panels can be applied to vehicles. They can be, now we're talking about using them as a paint coating, or as the blinds or the shading structures that are portable and all. So there's many different creative ways of applying it, but actually simplifying or making the panels much more efficient. I believe that the solar panels now are around 20% efficient as far as converting the amount of sunlight, the photons that actually hit the panels. Their efficiency has increased from the time that we installed our panels in 2012. I think they were about 15% efficient, and this is the top of the line ones. Well, suppose we get up to 50% or 60%. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then there's folks that are looking at, well, there's also the heat generation, because of the back panel of that, maybe we can take some of that heat energy and capture that as well. So there's so many different innovations that are coming down the pike. I see this as being fascinating. I'm always interested in how we're using these renewable energies and trying to get as many, not only increase the efficiency and decrease the cost of homeowners being able to use these systems, but also the ability for us to be able to use them as multifunctional units. So if they're used as a blind for your windows to block out some of the sunlight, or whether it's used as a heat capturing system as well, or will you convert that energy not just into the batteries, which are becoming much more efficient, using them as compressed air. And that's one of the topics that I've seen used in the past. So I thought this information might be helpful to you. It's one of those things that I've been following all along. And I know when I hear something like there's a big 30% tariff on these panels coming in here, the first thing I thought initially was, oh my God, great, thanks. But when I investigated, it isn't nearly as bad as I thought. At most, it's probably setting us back about 6 months as far as the decline in costs. But in that 6 months, there's a little bit of a tweak in efficiency. So I hope this was useful. If you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe, and please share this on social media if you find it valuable. Thanks so much, folks, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.